Welcome to PBIS Classroom Practices, a module in the PBIS Fundamental Learning Series. My name is Evan Moss, and I am a PBIS coach for Virginia Beach City Public Schools. We always begin with the shared understanding of what positive behavioral interventions and supports, or PBIS, is in Virginia Beach. Anchored to Goal 2 within our strategic framework, PBIS focuses on the goal of student well-being. PBIS is a data-informed decision-making framework for establishing the social culture, behavioral, and academic supports needed for a school to be an effective learning environment for all students. Every goal within the strategic framework has an embedded equity emphasis. Within Goal 2, we are focused on engaging in culturally responsive practices division-wide. We identify and address inequities in discipline practices by investigating and implementing best practices and seeking innovative solutions. Through PBIS, Virginia Beach City Public Schools has a desire to move toward more equitable discipline. Through the use of a tiered framework, PBIS provides support for all at the Tier 1 level, some at the Tier 2 level, and a few at the Tier 3 level. Tier 1 involves several core components or supports. These supports include relationship and community building, common language of expectations, consistent structure and routines, student engagement, pro-social behavior acknowledgement, and effective responses to inappropriate behavior. Our learning intentions for this module are to first review the 4 core PBIS classroom practices, then explore the remaining 4 classroom practices, and finally create a plan to utilize PBIS classroom practices in your learning environment. Looking at the Tier 1 professional learning roadmap, you will notice that classroom practices fall under TFI Feature 1.8, Classroom Procedures. We will begin with the 4 core classroom procedures, and you will see them highlighted in orange under Classroom Behavioral Supports. You may be somewhat familiar with the PBIS classroom practices. Today, we're going to start by reviewing the 4 core classroom practices. These include expectations and agreements, procedures and routines, and behavior-specific feedback in the forms of acknowledgement and error correction. After, we'll take a deep dive into the remaining 4 PBIS practices and apply our new learning in a variety of activities throughout the module. Expectations and agreements, or agreed upon rules, provide clear meaning of what expected behaviors in the learning environment and other areas of the school should be. School-wide and classroom expectations are usually posted in the form of a matrix. By creating a dependable system of agreements and expectations, we are providing students with structures that help them to remain engaged in instructional tasks. When creating rules and agreements, it is vital that we obtain student and stakeholder input. In the example on the slide, you can see how a teacher at Salem Elementary School had students share what it looks and sound like to follow the RAMS code of being safe, respectful, and responsible. The next classroom procedure that we will be reviewing will be routines and procedures. By creating and teaching a consistent set of routines and procedures, we are increasing the likelihood that students will demonstrate the expected behaviors that are taught in the classroom. These procedures improve the functionality and productivity of the learning environment by creating predictability and structure. Examples of routines and procedures could include, but are not limited to, arrival and dismissal routines, station and small group procedures, asking for assistance, transitions, or how to turn in assignments. Behavior-specific feedback in the form of acknowledgement is verbal or written feedback that recognizes a student or group of students for demonstrating the expected behavior. We begin by identifying and describing. Behavior-specific acknowledgement identifies and describes both the student and the behavior being recognized. It is delivered frequently. Behavior-specific acknowledgement is delivered frequently at about 4 times as often as a corrective statement. So we would like to remember the ratio of 4 to 1. 4 positive acknowledgement statements for every 1 error correction. By providing students with behavior-specific acknowledgement, we are increasing the number of opportunities to build positive relationships with students while also increasing the probability the expected behavior will occur again. Finding out how students like to be acknowledged is also very important as well. Some students don't want to be acknowledged publicly. Recognize strengths and interests and keep it brief and specific. The last of the core practices is error correction, another form of behavior feedback. Error correction identifies the undesired behavior and is used as an opportunity to teach replacement behavior. Error correction is a part of the continuum of responses to inappropriate behavior. Effective responses to inappropriate behavior are calm and consistent and take place immediately after the behavior. They're specific in that they tell exactly what the student is doing and describe the replacement behavior. They are also brief and respectful. Now that we have reviewed the 4 core classroom practices, let's dive into the remaining 4 classroom practices. These include opportunities to respond, active supervision, physical arrangement, and group contingencies. Returning to the Tier 1 Professional Learning Roadmap, you will see that the remaining classroom practices also fall under TFI Feature 1.8 or classroom procedures. You will see them highlighted in orange under classroom behavioral supports. The next classroom practice that we are going to explore is opportunities to respond. Opportunities to respond are specific and intentional invitations to individual or groups of students to provide a verbal, written, or gestural response to an instructional prompt. Providing students with multiple opportunities to respond can lead to a decrease in disruptive behavior while increasing on-task behavior and academic achievement. Opportunities to respond also has shown to increase the rates of behavior-specific feedback, increase the number of correct responses, and make instructional time more efficient. Opportunities to respond includes verbal and nonverbal responses, actions, or gestures, or the use of response cards. Opportunities to respond can be individual, unison, or mixed responses. In this video that we are going to watch, you will learn more about opportunities to respond and see some examples of the different types of responses.
Teachers can enhance active engagement in the lesson content by providing exciting and relevant instruction and by providing a variety of opportunities for students to respond. These are sometimes referred to as opportunities to respond and include anything that makes the student think about and respond in some way related to the lesson content. Asking a group for a raised hand if they agree with a premise is a simple example of a group OTR. But the teacher could also ask students to share with a peer, draw a picture and hold it up, put their finger on a picture in the book, hold up a colored card to indicate a choice, give a thumbs up to indicate agreement, or even consider a solution to a problem and hold it in their head. The key is in getting the students to actively process lesson components on a frequent basis. Evidence shows that higher levels of teacher-generated opportunities to respond are associated with higher levels of active engagement and lower levels of disruption in classrooms across all students.
There are a plethora of ways in which a student can respond to a prompt. You will see several examples listed on the slide. Random individual responses use unpredictability to keep students engaged. When asking for choral responses, consider appropriate wait time. Keep in mind that the use of other materials such as whiteboards, signals, or cues also need the specific routine to be explicitly taught. With schools at a 1-to-1 technology ratio, technology has also become a vehicle for engagement. On the right is an example of a student choice board. This is an example of an opportunity to respond and provide students with choice when completing their reading assignments. We will now take a moment to practice. Can you identify all the opportunities to respond that took place in the science class? I would like for you to pause the video, read the scenario, and record the number of individual, unison, and mixed responses in the example on the screen. When you have completed the activity, play the video to see if you were able to identify them all. There are a total of 5 opportunities to respond in this example. Were you able to identify them all? The definition of culturally responsive practices in Virginia Beach City Public Schools is Virginia Beach City Public Schools will provide and support culturally responsive practices to meet the social, emotional needs of all students. Culturally responsive practices bridge the gap between learning and lived culture by focusing on authentic relationships, student experiences, and a pedagogy as a way to strengthen student engagement and build a culture that values both individuality and inclusivity. Now, I want you to take a moment to reflect on this question. Are opportunities available for students in the classroom to respond with personal experience? One way that we can allow for students to respond with their personal experiences in mind is to shift our questioning from exclusive questions or questions that could exclude individuals who do not relate or have experience with the topic to inclusive questions that allow students to share their lived experiences. Take a moment to see how these questions have shifted from exclusive to inclusive. We're going to take one more opportunity to practice with opportunities to respond. I would like for you to create a list of subjects or content areas that you teach. You will then identify the verbal and nonverbal opportunities to respond strategies that you could use to improve the student learning outcomes in those subjects or content areas that you teach. Which one are you going to make a commitment to develop first? Also, don't forget to consider how technology can be used as a tool to provide opportunities to respond. So for example, if I was teaching math, I could implement things like student response cards, think, pair, share, Jamboard collaboration, or video responses. These are all strategies to increase opportunities to respond. Take a moment to pause the webinar and create a plan. When you have finished, you may resume the module. Our next classroom practice is physical arrangement, or the arrangement and organization of the classroom. This is a preventable practice that positively impacts student performance. Physical arrangement includes the arrangement of furniture, seating arrangements, traffic flow, the student-teacher areas, and displays. Using physical arrangement to maximize classroom space has shown to increase academic engagement and student workflow. It has also shown to increase the on-task behavior and reduce the likelihood of problem behavior. When planning the physical arrangement of learning environments, consider the following look-fors. Materials are organized, easily accessible, and located in a designated location. Traffic patterns are clearly defined. We have eliminated blind spots. And visual displays are easy to read, relevant, and represent the students for which we teach. When developing the physical arrangement of your classroom, it is important to be sure that all students can be easily seen and that they can also see you. We should sit down at every desk before the first day of school to make sure that the students have a clear view of the teacher, the learning environment, and displays. Frequently used materials and supplies to be ready, available, and accessible. And we want to make sure that routines and procedures around using our classroom space have been developed, taught, and retaught. How can we set up classrooms to ensure that they are culturally responsive to the students we serve and reflect their unique identities? Take into mind the following culturally responsive consideration when developing the layout or physical arrangement for your learning environment in order to create a safe and welcoming space. To make systems more culturally responsive, we need an awareness and understanding of their personal values and cultures, as well as how those cultures and values impact their classroom and school environments. The projection of personal cultures and values onto learning environments can either engage or disengage the students and families they serve. To increase engagement, school staff must actively seek not only to understand their own cultural identities, but also to understand and validate the values of the students, families, and communities they serve. On the screen, you will see an example from Green Run Collegiate teacher, Mrs. Doback. She utilized student input to redesign the physical arrangement of the learning environment in order to make it a more productive space. For the redesign, students suggested areas for focused instruction and group work, but also comfortable spaces within the classroom. Providing students with the opportunity to help design the physical arrangement of the classroom creates a sense of belonging and ownership. You're working with a small group of students, and all of a sudden, a student starts to melt down and becomes very disruptive. Sending him or her out of the classroom is not the best option. How can you help him or her calm down and retain a positive and productive learning environment? Calm down or mindfulness corners are quiet areas of the room that help students de-escalate when upset. It should be available to all students, and explicit lessons must be taught consistently to support self-regulation in students. The calm down corner can include pillows, bean bags, and a rug, books, magazines, paper, or writing tools, privacy folders, visual calming strategies, visual timers, or things like sensory fidgets. Calm down corners or safe spaces in the classroom can lead to improved social emotional learning competencies in students. It is important to provide students with tools and a space to regulate their emotions. By doing so, students can have improved self-esteem, increased learning, improved self-control, increased positive relationships, improved self-directedness, and increased engagement. Mentioned earlier, the implementation of a safe space or calm down corner requires a routine that is taught to students. On the slide, you will see an example of how to create a procedure for using the space. Classroom setup should be student-centered. Specifics will vary from teacher to teacher and class to class, but common elements include these. Classroom milieu. Classrooms should be decorated with multicultural images that mirror students' backgrounds and showcase the diversity of our society. The arrangement of our furniture and supplies. The arrangement will look different depending on age, group, and subject, but all teachers can draw on these goals when setting up a classroom, supporting collaboration, fostering dialogue, encouraging ownership, and ensuring comfort. Student roles and responsibilities. Classrooms will be most effective when structured to maximize student voice and participation. And finally, classroom norms. Norms and expectations should take into account different cultural and communication styles, as well as gender differences, language needs, and the desire to challenge stereotypes. Students should be involved in setting classroom norms to generate buy-in. Now let's practice. Read the two classroom examples on the screen. Remember, a culturally responsive classroom contains the four elements: classroom milieu, arrangement of furniture and supplies, student roles and responsibilities, and classroom norms. Pause the video and answer the two questions on the slide. Consider how Classroom 1 and Classroom 2 do or do not incorporate each of these four elements, and how does this awareness influence how we approach our classroom environments? Once you have answered these questions, you may resume the module. The next classroom practice we will explore is active supervision. Active supervision allows teachers to monitor the learning environment while also identifying students who may need additional support. We use active supervision to know if students are using expectations, to provide frequent encouragement, to build positive relationships, and to increase student engagement and reduce problem behaviors. Active engagement is made up of three key components: moving, scanning, and interacting. While actively supervising students, we want to ensure that we have set clear expectations, we frequently scan the room, we reinforce positive behaviors, we provide error correction when necessary, and we engage in positive interactions. The first component of active supervision is moving. When supervising students, it is important to circulate among them. The movement and proximity to students will make your presence known and increase the likelihood of on-task behavior and heightened engagement. Our movement should be random and unpredictable. The second component is scanning, which involves frequently looking around the classroom. By doing so, teachers are able to look for instances of appropriate or inappropriate behavior while also identifying students who may need additional help. When working with a small group of students, we should position ourselves so that the entire room can be scanned from your teaching space. The final component of active supervision is interacting. While moving and scanning are important components, we should intentionally and frequently interact with students. Let's take some time to practice. Read the following scene from a classroom that includes the active supervision practices previously discussed. Identify each active supervision practice and note whether it is an example of moving, scanning, or interacting. Pause the video to complete the activity. Once you have finished, answer the questions on the slide. How could you use active supervision in setting or activities where you supervise students? And then what are you currently doing that you want to continue? Are there things that you want to eliminate? Once you have answered these questions, you may resume the module. To close up active supervision, I would like for you to consider how this practice could be shared with families and applied in the home. Take a moment to watch the video on active supervision for families. Then we will answer some questions or consider some questions.
Active supervision is an effective strategy to support children in engaging in expected or desired behavior. To use active supervision, the adult or caregiver frequently monitors children in specific settings or during activities before problems occur. Active supervision keeps children safe, minimizes behavior problems, and promotes the learning and use of desired behaviors. Active supervision involves a few key steps, including setting expectations, frequently looking around or scanning, positive interactions such as verbal and nonverbal pre-corrections and reminders, reinforcement of desired behavior, and when necessary, correction to help children learn the expected behavior. Here's how you can use active supervision in your home. Identify the setting or activity that would benefit the most from active supervision. Ensure that your child understands the routines and expectations for the setting or activity. If not, establish routines and expectations. Remind your child to get started with the next part of their day, or begin an activity. As the activity unfolds, look around and monitor your child's behavior. Use proximity, like physical closeness, verbal cues, and other nonverbal communication, like smiling or winking, to let your child know that you're paying attention to what they are doing. If a problem comes up, talk with your child privately in a non-emotional way, and give opportunities for positive interactions between you and your child. At different times throughout the activity, and at the end of the activity, praise your child's desirable behavior with positive comments and gestures. Provide your child with an opportunity to give feedback.
The final classroom practice we will be discussing is the use of group contingencies. Group contingencies are a if-then relationship between student behaviors and classroom events. Group contingencies use group reinforcement to capitalize on peer influence. We use group contingencies to prevent behavioral problems while increasing the probability of on-task behaviors. Group contingencies have shown to increase individual accountability by fostering teamwork. To implement group contingencies, we must determine the target behavior that we want to change, set an appropriate performance criterion or goal that the students will work toward in order to earn their reward. We will choose an effective reward by soliciting student input and by providing multiple options. And finally, we will implement our plan while remaining consistent with our expectations and our consequences. Now, let's see what it looks like in action. This is an example from Providence Elementary of a teacher using the positive behavior game, which is a form of group contingencies.
Today, during our reading lesson, we're going to be playing a game. And the game is going to be focusing on being respectful. Okay? So, being respectful in our whole group means what? Alejandro. Raising your hand to be called on. Great. Layla. Being quiet and listening, right? Not just being quiet and not listening. Okay? So our lesson today, yes, Zion?
Miss Carolina did that last year.
Miss Carolina did do that last year. So as you guys are being respectful throughout our lesson, I'm going to put a check underneath the word respect. Once we get all the checks for the word respect in our lesson, we'll earn an automatic brownie point on our pan. Okay? We're going to be focusing on inferencing and drawing conclusions in our reading. So what does drawing conclusions or inferring mean? Alejandro?
Inferring is like thinking how the character might feel.
How they might feel, right? Great. So Alejandro raised his hand to share his thoughts, right? So in Odin, your text evidence, and then we're going to combine it with our what? Genesis.
Our schema.
Great. So our schema. So what does schema mean? Because she's sick. So in this picture, think of the setting of the story, right? Is this story taking place right now? Do you put wood in a stove so that your house can be warm? No, right? I mean,
Back in the day, they did it.
great. So Audrey's raising her hand. So let's look at Audrey so that we can pay attention.
So back in the old days, they had like these.
Okay. And I again saw you guys really listening to each other because you guys were showing me that you were listening to people sharing their ideas. So we got our respect, so we earned our extra brownie point on our pan, but we're going to continue this on with our lesson, okay? Ooh, you want to earn a double brownie point?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Now, let's take some time to practice and apply what we've learned about group contingencies. When using group contingencies, we want to make sure that the student is acknowledged when the behavior occurs and that there is consistency with rewards when goals have been met. We want to obtain feedback from stakeholders to determine our best rewards and know that the most effective rewards are those that are non-tangible and education related. For this activity, I would like for you to create a list of target behaviors that could be improved in your classroom, and then identify ways in which you can reteach and reinforce these behaviors using group contingencies. What goal will you set for your students? What incentives will you use? How will you know when the target behavior has been mastered? And don't forget to consider how we can use technology as a tool to deliver group contingencies. So, for example, if I was working on the core value of respect and my target behavior would be to raise my hand when I have something to say and wait to be called on, I could use a class goal of maybe getting 7 tallies when I see that my friends or my students have raised their hand and waited to be called on. Or I might spell out the word respect and we earn a letter every time a student follows that target behavior. And then on the far right, you could see some of the different celebrations or rewards that are education related that the students could work for by following the target behavior. And some of those things could be extra computer time, some school-wide spirit wear, or the class do a favorite activity such as a brain break or a Go Noodle video. So now I would like for you to pause the video and complete the activity. Once you have finished, you may resume the video and the module. Thank you for participating in Classroom Practices, a part of PBIS Fundamentals. I hope that you have found this information valuable and have gained new learning that you can apply in your classroom.